Both players have won a game, and now it will come down to the last one in this best of 3 here for the opening weekend of the TSL3. It is the round of 32, folks. I'm DJ Wheat. Joining me is Husky. And Husky, you left off with a great question or great observation, is that both players sort of like showed their hand, tried for that aggression, and had their own style to win the game. And now if they sort of cancel each other out, what will happen now in game 3? The question that is all on our minds. Well, we've got Duckload.Ra as the red Protoss in the northeast position, and his opponent Loner, the blue Terran, in the southwest position. Of course, these are modified Shakuras here, so I believe we auto have cross positions. And Husky, that is a very nice thing to have, because when a Terran spawns on the other side of me on Shakuras, I pretty much want to just bang my head up against the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. This will be very good for the Terran player, and it is good to emphasize both players seem to have a very specific build in games number 1 and 2 that they went with from the beginning. They stuck with it, they tried to follow it through, and it did not work out. Now, we did see White.Ra's macro play very well in game number 2, but we also saw Loner's macro play very well in game number 1. So who's the better macro player? I'm not sure. I do feel like we will see a macro game on this map, just because at this point it is down to one game. It is basically a one-on-one. Everything else is in the past, and whoever wins this game is going to advance. And so are you going to try and advance based on some little tacky build or something like that? I think that both these players are good enough that they're going to try and rely on their mechanics and on their basic skill set. So as far as this map goes, most people are probably familiar with it, but there is a backdoor entrance into your base with the destructible debris there. However, there is a second set of, there's just a second destructible debris as well. So very rarely will you see any sort of early game harass, say kind of like on Blistering Sands, where you would kill those rocks and do an early rush. This map is much more difficult to rush, simply because your natural is easy to secure. There's only one entrance to it. Yes, the choke is kind of wide, but is, as far as StarCraft 2 maps are concerned, is still fairly narrow. So it does look like White.Ra going to be scouting. I was going to say expanding, but he's definitely not expanding to the bottom left. He's scouting to the bottom left side, and he did get a peek in there, as well as saving that probe right when that Marine spawns.
Yeah, and you know what? If this is a forced cross-position map, someone should let these players know, because it did look like they actually checked close positions and then cross positions. Either way, both of them, they're like, oh, okay, I found him. Here he is. So we got Psycor going down for White.Ra, and basically what Loner's seeing right now is exactly what he saw in the last matchup. Now here comes that Zealot. His goal is to go ahead and get that SCV out of there, and then White.Ra can choose whatever the heck he wants to do. But the big disadvantage that Loner has is, okay, I saw 2 buildings that could ultimately mean 30 different styles of play. So, which one is it going to be? And so that's where you say kind of forcing it into that macro game is definitely going to be, I think something that's going to happen here, as we do see this Reaper coming out. So we saw basically the same build that Loner did in the first game so far here on Shakuras.
Now, I really like this opener that Loner's doing on this map, because he's going to be using the Reaper to grab those watchtowers, possibly harass and force the Protoss player to stay in his base, and at the same time, that means he is going to be expanding himself, so he does have the command center on the way. It's nearly halfway completed, so his expansion timing looking to be much earlier than White.Ra's. White.Ra is actually adding on 2 more gateways, which is a much safer way to expand. And also, one thing that I really like what White.Ra is doing, we saw it in the last game, is placing those pylons around his base to get optimum vision. You can see the Reaper is going to be entering his base on the right side and see if he can snipe anything, but instead of sniping things, he just wants to make sure to scout, which is exactly what he's doing. May try to engage the sentry and take it out, as Reapers are pretty good against sentries, but the Reaper did not get the first shot. However, he did take that sentry out, which that is a huge deal. That is 100 gas that basically has just been evaporated. That sentry did absolutely nothing. The Reaper has paid for himself. Now he'll probably just leave it somewhere on the map, either at a watchtower or to try harass the mineral line later. This is why I love Reapers, is they're so easy to pay for themselves, and it allows him to safely expand.
Yeah, you put the threat out there, too. Now, suddenly White.Ra's like, okay, that Reaper got away. In game 1, I think he killed him, and I missed the gruesome death. But in this case, it's like, shoot, well, now Loner has someone out there, and he has left a sentry back there. There's also a pylon there making the cliff face a little bit tougher for him to jump up on, but he's a Reaper. He's got a lot of mobility. So we'll see, and we'll continue to see him harass here, but the Nexus is down for White.Ra. Meanwhile, we do have that orbital finally finishing here, so expect it to lift off and land pretty soon. And instead of that third barracks that we saw in Game 1, we now see a factory going down here for Loner. So he's got Tech Lab on one, Reactor going up on the other, and there is the starport right next to it. So expect to see some building swapping here, and we do have a bunker at the top. So, obviously he's not expecting anything to come in his way, but just preparing for what he's got, or for what White.Ra could bring at him. And White.Ra right now just chilling like, I'm going to get the second up, and then I'll go from there.
Now, interestingly enough, Loner is just now lifting off the orbital command. Now, he was making SCVs that entire time, so once he lands it, he will be able to expand there with all the SCVs transferring right away. The reason I'm curious as to why he didn't lift it off right away is because the Reaper did get taken out, but it also scouted the timing of the Nexus, and the Nexus timing is going to tell Loner that, look, White.Ra's probably not going to have any sort of super aggressive play here in the next minute or two, and so I can deal with basically anything he's sending. However, he did at least make SCVs that entire time, so his economy not going to be super far behind, as White.Ra's Nexus was actually delayed compared to that command center. But if you do look at the units tab, White.Ra has a slight worker advantage, not a huge surprise, because of course you do get that Chrono Boost, which just will make those units much quicker. However, he does have Colossus on the way. Thermal Lance has begun. The Colossus now is being created. It seems like White.Ra is really confident in sticking with standard Protoss versus Terran, getting out those Colossus. So it will be up to Loner. Is he just going to go tons of Marauders, or is he going to opt to go ahead and start getting out Vikings? Right now, we just see Stimpak and the Medevac. So it looks like he is going to be going for Marine Marauder like we've seen in the previous games. And the starport's just a little bit early, so he will have a nice, healthy Medevac count. And one last thing, you can also do lots of drops on this map at the second and also at the main base, just because it's so wide open.
And speaking of drops, we do have Loner prepping up a medevac here. It's in the north portion of the map, going through that neutral middle expansion, and he's going to go right into the back. Now, is he going to drop down and go after these rocks? Pylon, I do believe, did spot it and does see it. There is a reaction here as we have some stalkers being put out right now, but a couple of Marauders, they're in there. Oh, at perfect timing as the Colossus comes down and says, nuh-uh, this is my base. And he is going to get out of there now. Again, much smarter drop play by Loner than just basically sacrificing those Hellions as he did in that second game. Drop was ineffective. Now, maybe that didn't do a whole lot, but he didn't lose anything in the process, and now he's put the threat of another drop in the back. That will just keep White.Ra in his base a little bit longer.
The nice thing about these maps is that there is a lot of area on the edges that you can keep that unit alive with those units just kind of sitting there waiting. The drop is going to commence once again. He is going to kill several probes here. However, White.Ra is in position to deal with this. He's trying to focus out the medevac. However, multiple stalkers are going to get taken out. Looks like every stalker, actually, nice focus firing there by Loner, using the powerful Marauders against those stalkers. So that drop was definitely worth it. I believe he took out 3 or 4 stalkers as well as a handful of probes, and it looks like he may leave the medevac here just to, when the Protoss moves out, maybe he'll do a drop again and just try to continue that harassment. I do want to take a look at the army size tab. White.Ra is ahead, however, he did sustain some losses to his army, and he does have 10 more probes, so the army strength is actually going to be favoring the Terran quite heavily at this moment in the game. So White.Ra's going to have to come up with something to deal with the Marauders, and just looking at the production tab, we do have +1 attack, nearly halfway completed for the Terran player, which is very scary for Protoss if the Terran player is ahead in army as well as ahead in those upgrades, although White.Ra does have, the once again, double upgrades, 1 attack and 1 armor on the way.
And minor mistake here by Loner is he actually drops his units outside the rocks, and what happened was the medevac got taken out. Perfect use of the Colossus now, using that cliff to his advantage. Won't go out too far. His leash won't let him, and he does quickly come back. That leaves a few lone Terran units on the map, and he'll go ahead and take out these rocks, which could serve as another attack path later on. Meanwhile, Colossus is going to go out, just kind of scout a little bit. We've got scouting Colossus. That's a very expensive... Oh my gosh, here he goes. He's going to go through right now as he is going to take out those units, and the Scouting Colossus wins.
Yeah, he was able to destroy those 3 units that did kind of get left behind there. We.LonerPrime actually going to be moving out right now. Is White.Ra going to be able to deal with this? He does have 3 Colossus, and just looking at the production tab, he has a 4th one about to spawn. So if he can deal with these 4 Vikings, he should be okay here. as there is no Ghost in that army to use that EMP. Now taking out the one Stalker in the center of the map. Surprised to see White.Ra leave a Stalker at that watchtower instead of he has a probe at the south one, but he did lose a very valuable unit, and he needs to keep those units alive as much as possible. Just looking at the army size tab, wow, Loner shooting ahead, 143 supply to that 123, and this is becoming more and more difficult for White.Ra. We saw White.Ra reacting perfectly last game. I think Loner is having the good response, getting his third up before White.Ra can even move out to deal with it. We do have Blink and the +2 attack, +2 armor, so part of the reason that White.Ra's army is so weak is that he is focusing on those upgrades, even getting Blink. So if he can sit back just a little bit longer, and he will be able to get an army that is, you know, not only upgrade advantage, but also a nice tech advantage as well. So we'll see if he transitions into Storm. I don't think he can afford it off this 2 base, so he is going to be grabbing his third.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a great point here, is because we're seeing White.Ra go the tech route that he went there in the second game and really making sure that he has the more powerful army. We saw how effective that was versus what Loner threw at him. However, he was sitting with a much nicer economy, so now he's just got to stop for a moment and make sure that this third gets up, and then it's going to be rolling for him so that he can achieve that same level that he has. Now, +2 armor is on the way, +2 weapons is on the way, Blink is done, charge is now completing. We're just seeing armor +1 for the Terran. So as it stands, White.Ra still a little bit ahead there in the upgrade count. It's just 1-0 with a potential 1-1 coming up here soon. However, we do see Loner with this third base down, and it has been down for quite some time. So be interesting to see how this will play out, as we do have very Zealot heavy, very Stalker heavy, and of course plenty of Colossus here for White.Ra.
I think that White.Ra is very smart to be getting that Zealot charge as quickly as he can. Again, these upgrades are not cheap. He's gotten Blink and now Charge. So if he can sit back for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, then his army will be very scary. We do have a Ghost Academy on the way for LonerPrime rather. And we'll see, because this is a very scary time for White.Ra. He is going to move out. Now, the Terran player did scan a little bit earlier, but he did not see that +2 upgrade completing, and he's not going to know for sure that he's going against Blink and Charge. I think what this battle is going to come down to is those Vikings. There are a lot of Marauders on the ground, but the Zealots should be able to absorb the damage long enough for these Stalkers to engage the Vikings. Now, can White.Ra micro perfectly and actually take all those out? It's gonna be tough, especially since he has so many Colossus, while Loner has so many Marauders. If you look at the army in the center of the map and double-click on those Marauders, that is the majority of that army. LonerPrime knows it, and he looks like he's gonna be moving out to try to engage his direct. I think this is going to come down to one big battle. Whoever wins this, it is going to swing into their favor. The Stalkers need to be careful here as they are backing up, and here come the Vikings right now. Now, the positioning of the Vikings is not the best. They're actually a little bit ahead of that army, and just getting softened up a little bit. However, the Colossus are getting directly engaged by these Vikings. The Stalkers are trying to focus down the Vikings, but there are so many that I think all the Colossus will get taken out. The Zealots did force the Marauders back, which means that the Vikings are completely exposed, and actually Loner making a huge mistake here, leaving all of his Vikings to the far right side, and that means that nearly every single one is going to get taken out. It will be difficult to re-macro up those armies, even blinking to the left side to engage us, taking out a few medevacs as well as the remainder of the Vikings. So White.Ra barely able to pull that out and was able to hold this off. Now he actually has Loner on the run. Needs to make sure not to overextend himself there. But wow, he did hold. And if we do look at the units lost tab, that battle favored White.Ra heavily. 2,600 minerals there, less lost for White.Ra. So that was exactly what he needed. Now he can sit on his upgrade advantage and just start maxing out his army. He has +3 on the way as well. So as far as that battle is concerned, that went about as good as he could ask for. The majority of his units lost were those Colossus, though.
Yeah, I mean, White.Ra is just so impressive in how he chose to deal with that. Even warping in units in the exact second that the army attacked, but having the Stalkers up front, sort of baiting the Vikings out as they went for the Colossus, and then blinking back, suddenly the tidal wave of Zealots went in, and that is what is just wrecking Loner right now, realizing that those Marauders are just sitting ducks against them right here, and now we've got a bunch of Stalkers moving through, and oh my god, we could see some Terran getting a taste of his own medicine here, as it does look like he's going to spam, and maybe he's just going to defend this spot. I thought maybe he would grab those rocks and go through, because look at where the army of Loner is. Right now, Protoss has enough. Oh my god, look at this poor dropship. Oh, goodbye. And that was good enough, as White.Ra paid for that, putting those Stalkers there. He could choose to go through the back and really throw Loner off here because his army would not be able to get back in time. And where are all the production buildings here for Loner? Pretty much a majority of them in the main.
Okay, I do want to mention, I think your replay is a little bit behind. We did see that medevac go down, which is going to be a huge deal. White.Ra also has 3 Archons in the center of the field. Interesting use. I don't believe he actually has Psystorm on the way, as he's just going to rely on those Archons, which do absorb a lot of damage. Yes, Psystorm, the tech is at the 3rd base, but it has not been researched yet, even though he can't afford it. So we'll see if he decides to use that, or if he wants to rely more on his charge lots and that Blink Stalker Micro. Now, the expansion timing for this 4th base was nearly identical. LonerPrime's did finish a little bit earlier, and he is going to get just a slight economic advantage that way. But again, White.Ra is going base for base, and after winning that battle in the center, then he is going to be in good shape. You can see White.Ra moving out with his Stalkers right now. Needs to be careful that he doesn't get caught out of position with that army. Now, the Observer is flying around for White.Ra on the top left side, and he did see the army size. He knows, once again, he is going against a lot of Marauders, but he has a huge upgrade advantage with that 3 attack and that 2 armor for White.Ra, and White.Ra doing what he loves to do, and that is placing cannons in the center of the map. He is going to be positioning those right there where it guards not only his expansions in the bottom right side, but can also help out his army in a big battle. I think that LonerPrime may move out and try and seal the deal, but if you look at the army size tab, both players are maxed out, so we are going to see yet another epic battle.
Yeah, and I think what's going to come in huge here are the EMPs. How will those come into play? He's going to have to be very careful with them. There we see a couple launch out. All the Zealots just get absolutely annihilated, and so do most of the Colossi. However, there are still, look at the Archons doing a ton of damage. There's only 4 Vikings left, as we're seeing half of the Stalkers focus on the Marauders running away. The others taking out those Vikings, and that is not looking very good here for Loner, as now we just have White.Ra marching through the center of the base, taking it all the way to the front door of Loner, and I cannot see Loner coming out of this. There are still so many units left for White.Ra.
Now, that battle really came down to the upgrades that White.Ra had, and also, if you're curious as to what just happened there, you need to go back and rewatch that, or rewatch the VOD. There's the GG, LonerPrime getting knocked out. Basically, White.Ra's micro was absolutely perfect. He didn't just sit back and let his army engage that directly. He was actively blinking, trying to get the Archons to do that splash damage to those Vikings, and keeping his Colossus alive as long as he possibly could. I want to mention he did not use a single Psystorm in that entire battle, able to win it against Masked Marauder with just micro alone, which is something that is very difficult to do. So I have to hand it to White.Ra, being very greedy when it comes to the upgrades, but in the long term, it absolutely paid off. If Loner would have moved in a little bit earlier, those upgrades would not have kicked in, and so White.Ra, that micro was insane. I'm definitely going to be rewatching that, as that shows you how to beat a huge ball of Marauders and Vikings, and I honestly think that Loner had a good build there with the Ghosts, using the EMP as well as the Marauders and the Vikings. His build was not bad, and he did not slip behind in the macro. Really, I think this game came down to the micro.
Yeah, and I wonder if Loner was thinking, okay, the Zealots kind of ripped through me. Like, I am a wet Kleenex, and the Zealots just kind of like busted through me like football players coming out on the field. And I think that he said, well, once I add enough Ghosts to my army, those things will be no problem. But really, the control of White.Ra in all of those battles, everything from what the Stalkers were effectively targeting to from the Zealots just kind of making those Marauders ineffective. If you saw what was happening, the Colossus were so far behind in the army that there were a couple that weren't even doing anything. They were just waiting for their opportunity to get in there. So it really, really impressive play by White.Ra. I felt that he read and reacted accordingly. I'm a little surprised that Loner went for something that obviously didn't help him out in game 2. And those charge lots were just sick. So we are going to see Duckload White.Ra advance on. LonerPrime does manage to take a game off him, Husky, but unfortunately White.Ra, the fan favorite, I know a lot of people are wiping the sweat from their brow going, wow, that could have totally wrecked my brackets right there. But he does come through after losing that first game. And unfortunately, Loner, while he does take a game, Husky, he didn't look bad at all. I just think White.Ra definitely looked like he was playing a fine line of perfection today.
Yeah, definitely don't want to downplay how Loner played this time. He played very well, very exceptional. And honestly, in that last game, I think it was just White Raw bringing it to the next level. And even though he engaged an army that can traditionally be very effective against the unit combination he had, then he just dealt with it perfectly. So definitely the better player today. And Loner, I mean, he had a tall order to try and fulfill with going against White Raw right out of the gate. And I was a little bit skeptical of White Raw's play in game number 1. And I think it's important to note, though, that the 2 games that White Raw was not aggressive, he just sat back, relied on his macro, relied on his game sense and unit combination. Those were the games where he really started to shine. And so while he did lose the micro battle in the early stages, he was just fine going against Loner. The last game was pretty close, and I honestly just can't even believe the micro there, because even his Archons were getting EMP'd, which doesn't knock out their entire shields like it did in StarCraft 1, but it still does a heavy blow to those units. I don't know how he did it, because his Archons were actually stuck there for a couple of seconds before being able to take out those Vikings. So White Raw going to advance very convincingly after that last game, 2-1. So pretty exciting. I'm glad we didn't have a 2-0 sweep there. That was a nail biter, and so all the White Raw fans super excited about that. But I think we are gearing up here for our next series. So far, this has been a blast, by the way, DJ Wheat. These games so far, and we're only halfway done. I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive this.
Well, we're going to have to try. We've got EMTs and resuscitation devices on hand at each of our locations just in case anything were to happen. They might also have to jolt my computer here if it goes down one more time. But hopefully it won't happen. And yes, you are absolutely right. Game 3 here for day 2 of opening weekend is going to take place. And another fan favorite marches up onto the stage as his intro music plays. And that is TLAF Liquid Huck, our Protoss player who is currently residing in Seoul, Korea, and he's going up against an opponent who clawed his way through the qualifiers and said, you know what, points aren't good enough. I'm going to win myself the way into this tournament, and that's exactly what he did in TL Open number 15, and that is Mao's Hasuab. So one of the very, very few mirror matches in the opening brackets here of the PokerStrategy.com TSL3. And to say I'm excited for this one, I think is an understatement here, because both players shown some great play as of late. Can Huck use that Korean live-in advantage? Or will Hasuabs and his recent success in online tournaments have what it takes to take him out? Either way, Husky, I'm very excited for this matchup.
I am freaking out, absolutely. Protoss versus Protoss. People who watch my channel know that I love this matchup, so I'm sorry if I say the terms Protoss versus Protoss 800 times. I am known for that. Huck probably going to be the favorite in this one, just based on his recent GSL success with the S-Class, and of course, as you mentioned, living in the Korean house. You cannot say enough about how much that helps a player to be able to live in a house with other top-tier players playing at any time of the day. I mean, you are basically eating, sleeping, and breathing StarCraft 2 when you're over there in Korea. And I was just informed that since White Raw advanced, he will be going against MC in the next round. So that will be an epic matchup. Once again, MC, I mean, I think he's the favorite against anyone. But if anyone can take him down, I think it'll be White Raw. So that's an epic matchup. I am super hyped about that one as well. This tournament could not be moving fast enough, because there is just so many matches that to me feel like the finals of other tournaments. And we are about to watch one of Hasuabs versus Huck.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's go ahead and get to our commercial, and when we come back, game 1 of Mao's Hasuabs versus TLAF Liquid Huck. Apparently, Husky people said, these guys like to talk about it. Let's just see some games. So you know what, damn it? Let's see some games when we come back. Game 1 of Hasu versus Huck coming up next for the PokerStrategy.com TSL3.